The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at their own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live in the month of April. This is April, the A month, and where depending on where you are, there might be different words that you're associating with autism, like autism acceptance, autism action, autism advocacy. There are so many A words. Accomplice, we want to be accomplices and really good allies for the friends and family that we love on the autism spectrum. So whatever part of this month sings to you, we hope that we have some programming for you. We've got a very busy month where we have taken pains to make sure that there's something for everyone. Today, I have to be honest, we've got an amazing guest that's going to be joining us, Janet Elliot. She is the author of a book entitled The Alien Savant with a subtitle, My Autistic Brother's Journey Through a Neurotypical Universe. A really amazing opportunity to hear from somebody who has really had a front seat to look at autism through the years, starting in the early 60s. So I hope you stick around for that. Before we get to all of that, though, we got a lot of things to cover. First of all, we are premiering this show right now live. We did pre-tape this because, as many of you know, we are moving our studio as we are showing this. So we couldn't be live and moving at the same time. So we're premiering this show and many others right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can check out our schedule. We have the whole schedule available for you of all the amazing interviews that we did for the month of April, because we did not want to leave April untouched. So for those of you who are watching live right now, there is an opportunity right now. The chat is live. You can be talking with us. It's possible that Janet might even be watching right now and can answer questions that you have. So feel free to participate in the chat. We know that most of you, though, the lion's share of you, like to view our new shows, not view them. You like to listen to them in podcasts. And our shows are available wherever you get your podcasts, available as a free download. Now, I always say it's available for free. It's for free. It's for free because it is when you download it, but it isn't actually free. We have defrayed the cost for you by allowing sponsors on those shows. So I hope when you hear the sponsor that you have the same reaction that I do, which is I always say, woohoo, I didn't have to pay for this because they did. I hope that you embrace that and that that's wonderful for you, because we work very hard to make sure that you have an access to this information without cost to you. But you do have to enjoy the advertisement. If for some reason that is not your thing and you are like, Shannon, I am on the treadmill because I'm training for that triathlon and it really kind of gums me up when there's a commercial because I want the content, we got you. All you have to do is go to glow.fm/autism live. When you go there, you have the opportunity to pay a small monthly fee, $5 a month, and what you get is everything ad-free. So you get Autism Live, you get Ask Dr. Doreen. Really, everything that we do on the Autism Network shows up in your inbox whenever it premieres. You have the ability to listen to that at your leisure, and you will get it ad-free. So there is that. Okay, so I think that's everything. I feel like I left something out. Don't worry, because we're moving, and very soon you'll see us in the new studio, and it will look very similar because we always shoot on a green screen, so it's not going to look that different. But we will be fresh-faced and tired, and we're very excited about that as well. But before we get to all of that, and before we get to our guest today, we have the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to figure out what does this mean, not only to us, just so that we can edify ourselves, but so that we know how it can help us on our journey. We always say here at the Autism Network that we're here to provide information and inspiration to that larger autism community that starts, of course, with individuals who are themselves on the spectrum. Whatever word you use to describe, whether it's autistic, having autism, being neurodiverse, neurodivergent, whatever the words are that you use, we respect that, right? But we also include in our conversation everyone who loves those individuals. For us, that's that larger autism community, because we believe that if we have good allies paired with our folks that are on the spectrum, then we can help to support and be a bigger voting bloc, right? We can get more done. So, si se puede, you know what I always say. Okay, we hold hands. We get through this together. All right, so today's jargon term is FAPE. Right? FAPE. It can be a blessing. It can be a little bit of a pain in the you-know-what, because it is IEP season right now. And for those of you who are dealing with your IEPs, please check our library. We've done a lot of parent-to-parents on IEPs and the best way to get the best result from your IEPs. We have older shows with the amazing Bonnie Yates that are under the playlist of Know Your Rights, where she describes all kinds of things and answers people's questions. We have years of those. We've done a lot on IEPs. There are a lot of parent-to-parents that I've done, because we're not all special education attorneys, right? So if you need help and support, please look there, but also write to us if you've got something that's going on. And I hope you check out, because there's an amazing resource, the Parent Center Hubs. I hope you found the one that's local to you and that you're getting good support there, because that's really what they're meant for. But today we're talking about FAPE. What is FAPE? Because it's at the center of everything that happens at that IEP meeting. So let's take a look at the first definition that we have. FAPE stands for free, which is critical, right? Appropriate public education. It is a federal law that guarantees that children with disabilities receive a free public education. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, better known as IDEA, and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 are the federal laws that protect this right. That comes to us from Google AI. I want to point out that of all the words that are in FAPE, free we get, right? Public, we understand. Education, yeah, okay, we can argue a little bit about that. But the main thing at an IEP that we're trying to determine is what is appropriate for this individual. It's an IEP, an individual education plan or program, right? So we need to figure out what is appropriate for this individual. That's the word that is the most contentious here. Because appropriate, to me, might mean something might seem appropriate to somebody else that's different, right? That might be the thing we argue about the most. Let's take a look at our second definition and see what we have there. So FAPE means special education and related services designed for a student's unique needs. I love that. The student's education must be designed to help the student make progress in school. Special education must also be designed to help the student learn skills for independent living. And that comes to us directly from the Summary of Educational Rights, which is on the california.gov education site. I love this one because one of the things when we're in school and we're deciding what's appropriate, so many of you lately have been writing to me and saying, oh, a variety of things. But the one I think that kills me the most is that some of you have your child be assessed. You got an autism diagnosis. You were sent to the school and the school evaluated your child and came back and said, oh, they don't need an IEP. There's no educational need. They're fine educationally, so they don't need anything. Because this totally tears my ticket and really is, at least a little bit against the law, right? Because we're talking about the law right here, and here it is. It has to be designed for your students' unique needs. Your child needs absolutely nothing uniquely at the school. We're not just talking about education. We're talking about the noise level. We're talking about where their seat is. We're talking about how they take notes. Your child needs nothing? I just don't think so. Because it has to be designed to help your student make progress. Not be where they are here, make progress, which means we're going to move to a different square. But then this last sentence, the school conveniently forgets. They go, oh, there's no educational need for your child, but special education must also be designed to help the student learn skills for independent living. And within that independent living, we get all kinds of things here like social skills, right? You can't live independently if you can't ask a question, right? So we're talking about social skills, social language. We're talking about language and communication. We're talking about OT, work skills. Your child is entitled, if your child has an autism diagnosis, your child is entitled to an IEP. And if they try to tell you that there's no educational need, I want you to send them this paragraph and say, are you actually telling me that my child has no need? And then, of course, you say to them, how about this? How about this? And you have a list of things that's going to be different for every single kiddo. But, here are the things that my child needs and is entitled to. It usually means that you have people who are trying to cut a corner financially. And I used to love, there was a mom when my son was having IEPs, there was a mom in my support group who would always say, when you can see the dollar sign over my child's head and you can show it to me, that's when we'll talk about money. But there's nothing in IDA that says, oh, unless it's expensive. But you will see schools and sometimes entire states. Boy, the state of Texas got slapped hard a couple of years ago because they decided that the amount of kids that could have special education was something like 11%. And that if there was a kid who came in after the 11%, oh, sorry, the program is full. Well, it doesn't work that way. And they got fined heavily for deciding what the percentage was without looking at the individual kids. Oy, my temperature goes up. I get hepped up about it because this is important stuff, you guys. And as you see, when we talk to our guests, advocating for our children, knowing at least the bare minimum about what our children are entitled to gives us a platform to go to those IEP meetings. And we don't have to be contentious in the beginning, because if you know, well, this is what my child is entitled to, when somebody comes back to you and says, oh, your child isn't entitled to this, you don't have to bother getting mad, right? You can just say, well, that's not true. Here's what's true. And now is an opportunity for you to be a higher person than you just were before I get legal help to help me, because you're wrong. And what I find 9 times out of 10 is when you are armed with the knowledge, the fight doesn't have to be a fight. Then suddenly we can have the discussion about what is actually appropriate. And that is the key. We want to make sure that when we're in those IEP meetings that we're never using the language best. Well, what's best for my child is this. Unfortunately, that's not what IDEA says. But what IDEA does say is that it has to be appropriate. And the question that I was always asking at IEP meetings is, you've offered us this and said that it's appropriate. Tell me why. What are you basing that on? Because I think that this is appropriate, and here's what I'm basing that on. And boy, that worked. It worked a lot. I was not well liked. Ask me if I care. I don't care at all. I don't care. And you know what? Whenever my son would leave a school, the people, there were, not everyone, there were people who still didn't like me, but there were some people who would come to me and say, I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I appreciate the fact that you didn't back down, and we learned a lot from it. Thank you. We will know for the next person that comes through. And I always remind them the next person is going to be different. So, but FAPE, it's the law of the land. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to take a short break. We're going to show you some of what's coming this month that's happening so that you guys can take a look. Then we are going to be back with Janet Elliot, the author of The Alien Savant, My Autistic Brother's Journey Through a Neurotypical Universe. So take a look at this.
It's the last week of April, and boy, do we have some great shows. On Monday, Shannon welcomes Janet Elliot, author of The Alien Savant, to discuss her book and the state of special education today. On Tuesday, Shannon and Dr. Doreen discuss the topic of sleep. And on Wednesday, we finish the month with our very special guest, Dr. Temple Grandin, the Autism Network, providing information and inspiration to families for over 14 years.
Welcome back. As promised, I've got an amazing guest for you. Janet Elliot is going to join us right now. She is the author of the book, The Alien Savant, which tells the extraordinary story of Michael, a nonverbal autistic savant who communicated with his art through his sister's eyes, Janet. We discover the realities of life with autism in the 1960s and 70s, when society struggled to support those who were different. I want to tell you a little bit about Janet. You know, I always say siblings grow up to be the most amazing people. Well, Janet is a retired retail corporation owner, draws from her personal experience growing up with a developmentally disabled brother, Michael, in the 1960s and 70s. Her work offers a poignant look at the evolution of special education and family advocacy. With a blend of heartfelt storytelling and extensive research, Janet provides valuable insights for educators, social workers, and parents of neurodivergent children. If you want to learn more about her and about the work that she's been involved with, or about the book, The Alien Savant, we encourage you to check out myguidedpen.com. I'm so excited to welcome her to the show. Janet, so thrilled to have you on Autism Live. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Shannon. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here because you heard me say that I think that siblings grow up to be the most amazing people. And so it's always thrilling to have a sibling here, but also you've got a tale to tell that I think is critical for us all to hear right now about what's the special education and what services were available in the 60s and the 70s, because we might be going back there. So I'd love it if you would talk to us a little bit about your experience. First of all, Michael was your younger brother. Maybe tell us first, before we get into everything else, something that you would like for us to know about Michael and about being his older sister.
Well, I'm 7 years older than Michael and the oldest. And Michael was the only boy. I have three sisters. And just that it was a time, the 60s and 70s were a time when they didn't understand about children like Michael. They didn't know, and all we thought initially was that he was hearing impaired. But we didn't realize the other things that were going on or were going to develop. And when they realized that, that he was behaving differently, it was not the norm for the time. They had no criteria for autism. They had no way of knowing what that was as a separate entity. So, the psychiatrists, the doctors, whoever, was dealing with him, they just kept recommending going into institutional care, because that's all there was for children like Michael that, deviated from the normal behavior. So kids with Down syndrome, kids with autism, any of those type of things, any, neurodivergent disability, they most of them were institutionalized. Yeah. At the time that Michael was growing up, there were 20 institutions in Ontario, which is where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And, these places were full of children. And unfortunately, they didn't get much in the way of an education. They got basic care, and that was about it.
It's so scary to think about. When I was growing up, because I was born in 62. So, in the 70s, early 70s, my family moved, and I met a little boy. There were two kids who lived in a house sort of behind us. And I met them when they were babies. And then I sort of blinked. I got a couple of years older, and one of the boys was, what we would consider heavily impacted. But I had not seen him in years because his mother kept him inside and wasn't bringing him out. So the first time I remember meeting him was when he showed up on my mother's porch, and my mother had a porch swing, and I didn't know who he was. And I remember the way everybody talked about him and the way that our neighborhood behaved. It's so shameful to me. But I understood that his mother kept him locked in because he was a runner. But I think back to that time all the time and think, what must that have been like for him? And what must that have been like for his family and for his mom and his sibling? It's very, very personal to me. And right about the same time, and I asked a lot of questions about it, I found out that in my family that I had I guess he would be like a second cousin that I'd never heard about. And they showed me a picture of him. And I don't know what his diagnosis was, but, there was a picture of this little boy in the institution, and his last name was written on his arm so that they wouldn't confuse him with anybody else. And it just is such an emotional, traumatizing memory for me. So when my son was diagnosed, I thought, oh my goodness, can I imagine being a family that could drop him off, my precious, wonderful baby who was struggling, right? But he was still my baby. I couldn't imagine him dropping off and having somebody write on his name and give him that kind of treatment. But for your family,
that's how my parents felt.
Yeah.
My mother felt exactly like you did when they said, Michael it would be better for him to be with his kind. And my mother went, his kind are right here, his family. And she never deviated from that way of thinking. It was like, don't even suggest it because it's not going to happen. He's staying with his family. But she certainly didn't. My parents never hid him away. He went with us on most family excursions and trips and camping and whatever. He was with us. So they had to have, eyes in the back of their head to keep an eye on him because he wandered.
Yeah.
And never got himself into danger. He knew exactly where he was, and he would always be able to wander back again. But they still had to keep an extra eye on him. So.
And as a young girl growing up, because you were 7 years older, were you also pressed into service to keep an eye on him and look out for him?
Occasionally. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, which most mothers were back at that time.
Yeah.
And he was at a couple of times, it's in the book, he was in residence, but he would be home on the weekends. So I would sometimes have to watch them in the evening if mom was out or whatever. It would be him and the younger one, my youngest sister. She's the only one that's younger than Michael. But I never thought much of it because I was babysitting my siblings. And he was never a problem. He was never trouble. So.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit though about, you had a first row seat of education at that time. You were in school, I'm imagining. Your sisters were in school. What was happening with Michael? Was he going to school?
Yes, a number of different places. There weren't any schools. There wasn't special ed the way we know it now. His first schools, they dealt with his hearing impairment. So he went to schools for the deaf. But because of the autism and his behaviors, which were, strange to all these teachers, they couldn't cope with it. They couldn't deal with him, and they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So the book explains all the different places that he went to. By the time he was, I believe, 10, they had moved him 6 times, 6 different places trying to find something that would work. And because my parents were, absolutely adamant, like, no, you're not just going to say that didn't work and that's the end of it. Nope, find something, do something.
Yeah.
My dad actually approached the local MP. I mean, he just would not let them just go, oh, well, too bad. My parents, particularly my father, was a huge advocate and for his own son. And he wouldn't let it rest. He insisted that they find some way to teach him, some way to reach him and teach him. But yes, it was a tough go when there wasn't any formal special education. There wasn't anything for children like him that had been, and that wouldn't happen really until, boy, that was the 80s before anything would really start happening. When
we think about what the prevalence was at that time, it was 1 in 10,000, probably even higher than that, because I think it was 1980 that it was 1 in 10,000. It could have been 1 in 200,000 back then. So it was much less prevalent, or at least much less diagnosed. Let's be clear with that.
Yes, it was.
But you mentioned you were in Ontario. I assume you mean Ontario, Canada.
Yes.
So this whole time when he was going to school and being moved 6 times, this was all in Canada?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Really interesting.
However, similar situations were happening in the United States.
Of course.
They were sort of keeping on par with each other as far as the lack of help. And there were a lot of institutions in the United States, too, that were not the best of places.
Yeah, absolutely. But you talk about, and this book, while it's a memoir, it's really a call to action, and about advocacy and about inclusion. And you've mentioned a couple of times that your parents were real fighters, that they fought for Michael, and they sort of set that standard, I would imagine, for the family. What advice do you have for families now? It's such a different playing field right now, and it's changing every day. But what do you think that your parents did that you can share with other people that was so critical for Michael's benefit?
The main thing is to, as much as you can, treat your child like the siblings. Like everybody gets treated more as equal as possible. But one of the main things as a parent that my parents did, and I'm a pony like you. My son has Asperger's, and he's now in his 40s, late 40s. So, but there wasn't much for him either. It was still a problem back in the late 70s. And anyway, the one thing is to get involved with anything your child wants to be involved with. Be involved with the school. If they have any kind of volunteer program, if you can afford the time, please try to fit in and help, because if your child wants to say be a Boy Scout, then be prepared to be a den mother.
Yeah.
It's things like that. And when you're there and you're dealing with your child, and the others can see, the other children can see, and the other adults can see how to treat your child, how you expect them to treat him, and how to deal with when there's a problem, when your child goes into meltdown, and how you deal with it. And you're teaching them, you're helping them to accept your child.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the main things as a parent. And now I'm a grandparent. I have 15-year-old twin grandchildren. They're both on the spectrum.
Wow.
So yeah, I know.
So you've got quite the perspective
here. But my daughter does the same thing. She's very much involved in their lives on every level. She expects them and puts them into situations that are a little stressful, but she helps them through it. She and that is the most important thing, because even if you know that your child is not going to fully be able to function completely all the time without some help, that you're there and showing and helping your child be accepted.
Yeah. So you've got quite the perspective, though. If we think about this, you've got 3 generations of perspective on school, about how much this has changed. So with Michael, who kept being shuttled from different things because people didn't know what to do with him, and the norm at this point, I think we can say, is that a lot of people institutionalize their children. And what was left for people who, had parents that were advocating in a different way was slim to nothing. And I don't think the training for any of those people is just frightening to think. Did Michael end up going to school up to a certain age or at a certain point?
Yep, he did. He was 19 when he finished formal schooling.
Mm-hmm.
We called it graduating, such as it was. But then he still stayed home with my mom and dad, and dad kept on keeping him involved, not letting him just sit in his room and watch TV, because that's what he would have done, and doing his artwork. I mean, he loved drawing, and he did it at every opportunity, but dad didn't want him just sitting, wasting all whatever he had learned. So, but because his communication skills were very poor still, because he was still hearing impaired and nonverbal, so he did some signing, but very randomly. It was single words, nouns, something that was very visual, because he was totally visually, that's how he learned. And but dad kept getting him involved in different things. He got him into some ceramic classes, and Michael ended up being exceptionally good at that, because he was very meticulous. His work was beautiful, and his colors were amazing. And in the book is a lot of pictures of his work. That's what started the whole project of doing the book. Was I had all his artwork, and the pieces were starting to fall apart because they were over 40 years old. So I wanted to put them in a book. And then I ran across all his school reports and such. And I thought, wow, what a story to go with it. So I put it all together along with my own personal recollections.
How lovely. And the book is called The Alien Savant. We're talking with Janet Elliot about her brother. But Janet has also identified for us that she's a very proud pony. And we have to come up with a new word for
a grand pony.
A grand pony. There we go.
A grand pony. Well. Yeah.
I love that.
So I'm a Sony, a pony, and a grand pony.
There we go. I love this. I love coining new terms. So that's amazing. But the book is a memoir about her brother, but it's more than that. It's a call to action for advocacy. Let's talk a little bit about the title, because the title, The Alien Savant, you mentioned that he was an artist, and that he was a brilliant artist, and that art is something that should not be overlooked because it is a form of communication. Talk about his art and what he communicated through that.
Well, that's how we found out that he thought he was an alien. In his mind, that explained why he was different. He knew he was different. He knew he was not the same as us or his parents or any of the other children. He knew that. And so he decided he must be from another planet, because that made sense to him. Mm-hmm. And he loved anything to do with outer space and space travel. Star Trek was his absolute favorite program. If you look at the lettering, if you look at the Alien Savant lettering, I'm sure I can get it there. You can see it's the Star Trek lettering.
I love it.
And then the picture underneath was one of his later drawings. It was one that he had done it as a drawing, and then he'd reproduced it on computer, because that was the last thing that he learned how to do, was artwork using Adobe Photoshop. Wow. And he turned out to be very talented with it. But that's how we came up with the title.
I love it. But But so how give us an example. How did he tell you through his artwork that he thought he was an alien?
Well, the artwork, some of the pictures, he would put the letter M, which was him, or his actual whole name sometimes, or one of the few words that he knew how to write was Michael. But he would put an M and he would put it on one of the planets, and then he'd have all these other planets with these very strange names on them. And that he had, we assume he made up, who knows, maybe they're real, the other aliens. So this is how he told us that he was from another planet. Wow. Was this M on any particular planet in his drawing. So
wow, so amazing. And I love that your parents really tried to make that flourish, that they saw that and said, let's get him involved in ceramics and things of this nature. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. It
was the computer art that was the real big winner. My father introduced himself to this woman she'd started up a cafe where they had computers in the cafe, but this was in the late 90s. So it was still not a thing. Like surfing the net wasn't a thing yet. But he approached her and asked her if she'd be interested in letting Michael learn how to do art. Would that be possible? Could she teach him? And she took it on, and she was amazing with him. Wendy was an amazing person, and she helped him a great deal. And they became actually real friends, even though she was, the same age as my sister Dorothy, but not a whole lot older than Michael. Although Michael mentally was never really much more than, I would say, about 10 years old. Was probably about where he would have been tested. He tested very high IQ on what they could test. He tested at a 120. However, because he was nonverbal, they couldn't really test all of his faculties.
Yeah. Now they have tests, IQ tests that are nonverbal, which we always urge our families, if you're a child on the autism spectrum, if you're going to do IQ testing, ask for the nonverbal testing, because otherwise when you stop and think about that, so he had a verbal test that he scored a 120. Can you imagine, Janet, what he would have scored on a nonverbal test?
Right. Probably. It could have been even quite a bit higher. So yeah. I've always thought that.
So now, going back to the timeline here, so Michael has gone through school. Now you've had a child of your own. What do you feel was different school-wise by the time your child was going to school? Was it better?
Okay, well, they still didn't have autism as a diagnosis. They decided he was a behavioral problem and hyperactive, and that's what. Now my son was verbal. He's actually Asperger's is his. But at the time, Asperger's wasn't known. We realized it later on as that's what he fit into that definition almost perfectly. The social part of things. Now, I was very, very fortunate in that somebody in my church, when he was real little, and we were trying to have him be in Sunday school, and it was obviously a real problem, a real handful for me to try and keep him to behave himself with all those other children. But he spotted that there might be a problem, and he actually found a place he recommended. We were able to get him a place. It was called the West End Creche, and excellent assessment and behavioral modification program, and it really saved the day. However, unfortunately we moved. And we moved out to the country, and there was no special ed in the school. There was nothing the equivalent anywhere in the whole vicinity. So we ran into huge problems trying to integrate him into a regular kindergarten at that point. He was 5, and it was disaster. He was suspended from kindergarten at least 5 times.
Wow.
I would get a call, please come and get him. You know, and it was like, oh my God, here we go. And it wasn't until grade 4, I believe, when they assessed all the children and they realized that he was gifted, and they got him into the gifted program. He had to go by bus. It was quite a ways away. However, because he was now in his, at least school-wise, he was in his right peer group, and he wasn't bored anymore, and his behavior was better. However, we did use Ritalin to take the edge off to help him cope with, sitting still at his desk and doing his work. And I'm not sure if Ritalin is still used. I don't know. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, risperidone is, I think, a close neighbor. I'm not sure. I'm going to shut up. But I don't know how much Ritalin is used. I think risperidone is the one that we see more commonly. And it, in some cases it can be great, but it can create big problems too. So it's always a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
But now you were still in Canada through all of this?
Yes.
Okay.
The whole book takes place in Canada.
Okay. But now you have these 2 wonderful grandbabies.
Oh yeah.
and I would imagine school has changed exponentially for them.
It's compared to what I went through and my mother went through. Yes, it's come huge leaps and bounds. We have the IEP. You guys have the same thing, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So they were able to get their own programs right from kindergarten, and they're 2 quite different children,
Yes.
even though they're twins. And so they're now in high school. Again, very fortunately, their high school has a special ed program, and they were able to continue their IEP. So they're in grade 10 now, or the equivalent thereof. And they integrate them in whatever subjects they are doing well in, and their strengths. They integrate them into the regular school program in those subjects, and then the ones that they're weak in or that they still need help with, and their behavioral, their social activities, they still work with small classes and extra help with that.
Amazing.
And they're both doing very, very well. They're really coming along extremely well.
Now, I'm deeply curious because Michael was so drawn to creativity and art, and it became a way of him communicating. For your son, does he have any leanings towards art or creativity?
No, he's an Asperger's. He was the math king.
Got it.
He finished. He came back to his public school. His request at the end of grade 7 in the gifted program, he asked, could he come back to grade 8? He wanted to graduate with his friends. And I never realized that he was that interested in them, but he wanted to be in a more normal situation. He'd done, I think, as much as he wanted to do schoolwork. And I said, listen, you might be bored. No, I'll be fine. And he was. And he was happy to be back in the regular school program for his grade 8 year. But then, and in high school, of course, because they could, work ahead at a further level, that's what he did. In his computer class, for instance, by the time he got to grade 12, they had him teaching the grade 9 introduction class, because he'd gone, as the computer teacher said, he's gone well past anything I know. But that was his forte, was computers, and that's what he does now. He's a web designer and web maintenance.
Amazing. Now, but because sometimes the kiddos that are really drawn to the math and computer, does he also have an interest in music?
I would say no.
Okay.
Other than he definitely likes to listen. But
okay.
In fact, that was one of the ways I used to keep him quiet when he was younger, I would put on certain records and he would play quietly while the music was on.
Yeah.
Um,
That's very
Yeah.
common, that those kids that are so math, there's something about music that's math. I don't understand it, but they tell me. And what about your twins? Are they showing signs of wanting to be creative?
the girl is very much so. Her artwork is beautiful,
Amazing.
beautiful colors. She's our little artist.
Okay.
Whereas the little boy, he's the math kid. And
Okay.
that's his thing. So
Okay, they're teenagers now, but I would still, my one recommendation, put a guitar in his hands and see what happens. Maybe a thing, maybe not be a thing. But in any case, I wanted to go back and ask, because we were talking about Canada versus the US, and we both have IEPs, but our jargon of the day today is FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education, which currently is the law of the land here. Do you have that in Canada? I don't even know.
well, it's certainly free. Absolutely. In fact, they're very much, they try to find children, find a program for the children. If there isn't one, they develop one.
Okay.
But we have the same problems in that we don't have enough instructors. We don't have enough people because, as you know, it's got to be a smaller classroom size to help these kids properly. We have, it's the same idea, even if they don't give it a name.
Well, I love that. It sounds like the thing with FAPE here, Janet, is that you have to fight for it. Even though it's the law of the land, you have to fight for them to give you an appropriate program. It sounds like you guys aren't having to fight for it because they understand it's the law of the land. Here, we have to fight for it. But when you do, you are entitled to it. Free, appropriate public education. I love that.
Right.
So one of the things that you talk about is making a lasting difference in the lives of those who struggle to find their voice. What advice do you have for us all to make a lasting difference? We should note that Michael is no longer with us. When did Michael pass?
March 21.
Of 21?
So fairly recently. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So your son knew him then?
Yes.
Okay.
Your whole family?
Yeah. They didn't spend a lot of time, together. Like my brother being autistic, they both of them weren't social people.
Yeah.
So they. My brother didn't interact with the younger ones a lot, other than he was always interested in their birthdays, and he kept a special calendar with everybody's birthdays marked on it.
Oh.
And he would always indicate that it was whichever child's birthday it was. He would acknowledge it by decorating. We had this desk in the living room, and just for the day, he would decorate it for that particular child, even though that child wasn't actually physically in the house or would even be around that day.
Was
It
important.
was just his way of acknowledging that he didn't know he had family and who his family was.
That's amazing. That's very sweet.
I mean,
when
we
you think
lived.
about it.
I lived a fair ways away once. I was an adult. It was a good half an hour to his house from my house. So,
But in terms of a lasting impact, because you're in your third go round in this. You have more information than most of us have. What are some guidelines for you? I mean, good heavens, you wrote this book about your brother. I'm sure you had a million other things to do. Why was it important to you to take the time and commemorate Michael?
because things happened to Michael, the way he was treated, that he wasn't accepted. Nobody was trying to help him in his terms. they were trying to force him into certain behaviors and certain a way to think that it just wasn't working. He was a visual learner, and they were trying to get him to speak. They did that for years before they finally realized that was not going to happen. So this is the thing, to find a child's strengths, okay, and build on them. Give them every power to use that, because their self-esteem is huge in how successful they will be. And their weaknesses, okay, we can work on them a little, but don't, if there's something that you can't change, then don't.
Yeah.
Don't put the pressure on them. Don't make your life miserable. If you can get around whatever that problem is, just go around it.
Yeah.
But absolutely work on their strengths. Absolutely, give them every opportunity to be successful, at whatever that they do. If it's artwork,
Yeah.
make sure they always got lots of paint.
Absolutely. I love one of the things that sentence that your publicist sent that says, if you've ever felt helpless trying to support a neurodivergent loved one, meet the Alien Savant and be a part of the change that recognizes the unique potential in every individual. It's a really lovely sentence. Tell us a little bit about where we can get the book and how we get the book and so on and so forth.
Okay, the book is available in most of the normal channels online. It just launched on January 15th, so I still don't have physical copies in brick and mortar stores. That's my next maneuver. But at the moment, you can certainly get it on Amazon in the States, Barnes and Noble. There's bookshop.org, which is a very interesting place to purchase books, in that some of the proceeds, you choose one of your local bookstores, and they will donate a certain amount to that bookstore of the sale. So I kind of like that particular concept. In Canada, it's at Indigo Chapters, which is the Canadian equivalent to Barnes and Noble. And as I said, on Amazon Canada, as well as the U.S.
Amazing. And what was the name of the bookstore again that donates to local bookstores?
It's called bookshop.org.
Okay, bookshop.org. Okay, fantastic. And I just, obviously, when you get the book, you guys can see some of Michael's artwork. Absolutely amazing, because artwork lives on. And what a wonderful thing. I recently became a potter in the last couple of years, so I'm sad to hear that his pottery is starting to crumble. Have you been able to save anything?
No, the pottery's fine. It's beautiful. Okay. But the pictures themselves, the paper being so old is starting to crumble.
Okay.
But
have you got somebody who can digitize it for you so we don't lose it?
That's what we're thinking to do. So we can keep them.
Absolutely amazing. The artwork on the cover is just beautiful. Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you for being such a wonderful sibling, for taking the time to commemorate him, for joining us, because really what a wonderful perspective you have. 3 different generations. I don't know if you're familiar with the Asner family, but Ed Asner, who was a very famous actor here in the United States, and he, would say that he had a son on the spectrum, and then he had grandchildren on the spectrum. He would always say, I don't think it's as much autism as we just call it Asnerism at our family. That was always Ed's.
Well, maybe it's Elliotism on my family.
I don't know. But it does give perspective, seeing it across the generations and being able to see. I know lots of families that have more than one person on the spectrum in their family, and they're always quick to note how very different they are as people. I think people tend to think, oh, well, autism, and think that is one color. And we know very clearly it is not.
It definitely is not. Well, one of the main things that came out of my brother's situation is my father his job was actually a film producer and editor. And when he was in his early 50s, he just did a complete about face. He went back to, he went to college and enrolled in the course to become a developmental social worker.
Wow.
Because he realized how needed it was. And so he made it the end of life calling.
I wish he'd made a documentary film. That would have been amazing. But I'm sure there's some home movies that you guys have.
Oh yes,
There's a project for somebody. Because you know what else? We don't hear enough about real people who had autism many years ago. The pioneers that we've all been following, the people who, the families who made the inroads. We don't get to hear enough about that. So Michael's story is very important.
Yes, it is. I feel it is. That's why I told it. When I found his school records and started reading through them and thinking, oh my gosh, this poor kid, but we got to tell people what it was like before so they can really appreciate where it is now and how important our teachers and social workers and the agencies that help the families, how important this is and how important these programs are.
Very. Amen to that. Again, if you want to know more about Janet or more about this book, you can visit myguidedpen.com. Janet, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. It was fun.
We really appreciate it. You take care and good luck to everybody in your family.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Okay, you guys, hope that you are tuning in this entire month. We're trying to bring you some really fascinating and uplifting and encouraging and elucidating information throughout this entire month. So please check the calendar to see what's coming up next. And we will see you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.